Hi, and welcome to the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. Our theme for tonight's discussion centers largely around Ghana Beyond Aid. Particularly, we've had a week of a variety of economic information. We've had reports coming from institutes. We've had discussions coming from the PDS issue also, where we're going to see some withholding of funds. We also learned this week that the World Bank will withhold some funds from us because of a variety of reasons. We also had on JoyNews a discussion my colleague had with Dr. Charles Rekubrebe, also on the economic state of affairs. And so largely it's been a week of economic discussions. And we want to crown it all here on the business edition of PM Express with my guest. He's from the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, popularly known as ISER. He's a research fellow. His name is Dr. Fred Janku, and he's going to walk us through this Ghana Beyond Aid discussion. We are going to start it off from ISER's State of the Ghanaian Economy report, which was released this week, about just 2 days ago. And we'll delve into the budget also and look at the revenue, expenditure numbers, grants, funding, etc., to see if indeed we can move towards a Ghana Beyond Aid and answer the question at the end of the show whether indeed Ghana Beyond Aid is just A, regular rhetoric, or B, an actionable agenda. So that's the focus of our show tonight, Ghana Beyond Aid. And as usual, we'll intersperse it with a lot of economic discussions. I promise to make it very simple. Doc is here. We'll break down all the terms, and as we do usually on this show, inform, educate, and enlighten you. So we're taking a quick one. We'll be right back. Right, welcome back. I'm sure we're all familiar with the Ghana Beyond Aid agenda, and no one in Ghana is unfamiliar with the calls for Ghana to move beyond aid. And in April this year, the Ghana Beyond Aid Charter and Strategy document was released, and it chronicles what exactly Ghana Beyond Aid means. I want to read just a portion of it, then we'll set the conversation rolling. So Ghana Beyond Aid is a national and non-partisan call to harness effectively our own resources and deploy them effectively and efficiently for rapid economic and social transformation. It is not an anti-aid or aid rejection. It is rather about being more efficient and effective in how we mobilize and use our resources. So it's not a push away from donor funding, support from international institutions or countries or developing countries, as it were. It's more about how we as Ghanaians can change our mindset, and that's captured in the document also, 61 pages, and how we can change our mindset and how we can develop our own resources to prop up our development in the country. But we want to start off our discussion based on ISER's 2018 State of the Ghanaian Economy report. ISER comes out with these reports on an annual basis or yearly basis. And ISER, again, is the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research. And as the name suggests, statistical, economic research. They delve into the numbers and keep you and I better informed. So Dr. Fred Janku is from ISER. He's a research fellow. I want to welcome him on the show. Doc, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I want to start off with the ISER report as we tie it into the Ghana Beyond Aid agenda. Going through your report with you just before we came on air briefly, certain things stood out in the report. And if you can start us off with the general overview of what ISER makes of this report and what you also as a research fellow, make of this report?
Thank you very much. As you said, ISA has been producing this report, I think, since 1990 or so. So every year we try to review the year before. So we came out with this report this year, but it's an overview of what happened last year. But also what we did was to add a mid-year review, so looking into 2019 to see what has happened so far. It's put together by a number of authors, so I'll just give you a few highlights and some of the things that stood out for us as a country, especially because we are talking tonight also about the issue about Ghana Beyond Aid. So the issue of shortfalls in revenue below target is something that concerned us as we wrote this report, because it's essential that we're able to mobilize enough domestic revenue. So the fact that revenues have fallen short of their target is a concern for us. And that also then brings in the issue of then, if your revenues are short, where do you get the money to finance your development? Of course, the issue about borrowing has come out, it's always been an issue, but also more strongly. And also the fact that the high proportion of borrowing is now hard currency denominated. So what that means, as we highlighted during the launch, is that then if you have shocks to your exchange rate, then you have to change a lot more cedis to pay your debt that you have in dollars. So even assuming that your debt remains constant, you need to dig out a lot more money in Ghana cedis to be able to service your debt and also to be able to pay back your debt. So that's also one of the issues that came out strongly, and that's why we raised the whole issue of efficiency in spending. If you are not raising enough revenue, take a household, you have your expenditures, you have your income. If you think that your income is falling short of what you require, we say that you should cut your coat according to your size, not according to your size, but according to the material that you have. So then the issue of efficiency in spending is what actually brought, one of my colleagues raised issues about size of government, raised issues about efficiency in that respect, raised issues about free SHS, and so on. So it's all about the discussion on how efficient we are managing what we have, given that our revenues are not as we want them to be.
On the let me knock them off one by one. On the issue of revenue, domestic revenue, tax revenue, and tax revenue, over the course of fiscal years, largely we have failed to meet the targets. Different solutions have been proffered on how we can meet this, and there's always a talk of the informal sector, and it seems like it's become rhetoric, and it may sound rhetorical, if I can put it that way, but wouldn't we be giving government too much pressure if we say it's easy to tax the informal sector? I know I've spoken to the director of ISA, Professor Peter Korte, where he says we should use the national card as a way to track and start taxing. Some of these interventions, I don't know, what are your views on some of these interventions?
Okay, definitely one of the ways to raise more revenue is about getting more people to pay tax. It's not necessarily about raising taxes, people who are already paying taxes, raising the tax rates, because it seems that people are already burdened with all these taxes. So yes, it cannot be putting too much pressure on government to rope in people into the tax net. But the real question is, what innovative ways can we find to do this? All right. People have talked about, where you make people more willing to pay taxes, because some people feel that they don't have to pay taxes because they are not seeing the worth of the taxes that they pay, although some of those people are not even paying taxes in the first place. So I think we need a debate about what ways can we find as a country to get more people paying taxes? And some of these people, some of these businesses are not businesses that are being done in tunnels underground. We know some of these businesses. And one of the issues, because it ties into the question you are asking, is about tax exemptions. Okay, so these are not even people who we don't know. It's not the informal sector. These are people we know. These are businesses, some of them foreign businesses, that huge tax exemptions, right? So it's something that we have to question whether we need these tax exemptions. Is it worth it? I mean, if we're to tax these people, would it bring in more revenue than if we give them the tax exemptions for various reasons, maybe probably for them to be able to create more employment? Are we getting our money's worth in terms of the revenues that we are foregoing because of these exemptions? So these are questions that we need to ask, and in a non-partisan manner, I mean, in a forum, find hard solutions as to how to get more people to pay taxes.
I want to just bring this in here on the tax exemptions part. A part of the document, the Ghana Beyond Aid document, mentions that we need to whip up foreign private investment interest within the Ghanaian economy. Recently, we discussed the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report, and we had dropped in our rankings. Some argue that it's mainly because other countries had significant reforms in their countries that propelled them to higher positions. But something like tax exemptions, Doc, don't you think it will fly in the face of private investment if we start actively, and I use actively guidedly, actively check these tax exemptions such that some foreign investors will come and say, okay, these people don't want to, for lack of a better word, absorb some of this risk I'll come and take by coming to set up here. Don't you think it will fly in the face of private investment?
Well, so that is why we need an analysis of whether or not we are getting, for lack of a better word, value for money. So you are giving these tax exemptions because you want to achieve a certain objective. So it's time for you to look at the objectives for which you brought in these tax exemptions in the first place, and ask yourself whether, you know, the alternative, which is to tax them, I mean, it could be various rates of taxes, whether it's a better option than these tax exemptions. If we don't do this kind of analysis, then I'm afraid talking about you know, attracting foreign direct investment is important, but how much are they contribute? How much are we getting from foreign direct investment in terms of employment, in terms of, because if there's no employment, or if the employment effect is not strong, and you are losing your revenues in the way of taxes also, then we have to question it. So we need to, I mean, we have is there a Ministry of evaluation?
Monitoring and evaluation.
Probably is one of the things that they could be looking at.
Isn't that one of the ministries that we should chop off as an excess on the expenditure part? Because if I'm not mistaken, I during this week I heard someone talk about what the Ministry of Monitoring and Evaluation is really monitoring and evaluating, because they argue that other ministries have within them M&E departments that can handle these things. But we can get into the debates of the expenditure as we go. On the issue of debt, so the exposure to the foreign currency debt, or debt denominated in currency other than the Ghanaian cedi, I'm struggling to see how we can remove ourselves from this debt quagmire, because we have, and all this with the going Ghana Beyond Aid. I mean, debt in itself is not bad, but when it gets to levels that you can't sustain, that's when it becomes an issue. We have a situation where the revenue is going on 3 main rigid items, leaving very little left for capital expenditure. Now, some of the debts we've taken have to be refinanced, etc. The capital expenditure needs to be financed from borrowing. So I see the debt cycle continually happening.
A vicious cycle.
Exactly. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself or it makes sense in what I'm saying, because it's something happens one point, and like you said, even if we reduce the debt right now, let's assume that our debt was wiped out, as was done with the HIPIC and then the FDRI, and then the CD is not stable, then we have a problem again.
Yeah.
So my key question here is, what else can we do? When the new administration came in, there was some reprofiling of debt and other things to try and reduce the burdens on us. But can there be any other thing that we can do to ensure that this exposure is contained?
Well, I mean, so you either borrow from your domestic sources or foreign sources. I think that what the debate should be about is how do we create the fiscal space? Where do we get? Because we are borrowing because we need, if you like, we need the money, right? So if you have enough, you won't need, well, of course, like we said, we're not saying I mean, the US borrows, most countries borrow. But borrowing will not be necessary, or the levels of borrowing will not be necessary if you raise enough funds domestically. And I'll talk about one major way, because one of the things that bothers me is about the issue of unemployment, which we also raised in our report. Yeah. Now, if you have a lot of your young people, you know, about 3 years ago, we started talking about this issue of demographic dividend, where you are having a lot of young people in your economy. If you have all these young people and they are not employed, or they are not in gainful employment, what it means is that your dependency ratios are high, and I think our dependency ratios are high in this country. And because of that, people are unable to save. Because
look, can you do me a favor and break down dependency ratio for somebody who don't understand what exactly dependency ratio means?
Basically, it means that if your dependency ratio is high, it means that a few people are working to feed a lot of mouths, as we put it. Now, to bring that down, it means that you have to get a lot more of your young people working. If your young people are working, then they can earn income instead of depending on their parents, because some people finish university for years, master's degrees for years. They are home. They are not working. They depend on their parents. But if you get these young people, create opportunities for them, and they are working, then you reduce your dependency ratios. You boost up your people's incomes, and then they can save. And when they save, you get a lot more, space in terms of savings in your own economy to be able to spend. But so long as the employment levels, the unemployment levels remain what they are, or even the jobs that we have are not jobs that make people meet their basic needs, then you cannot have savings from which you can invest. And then you would have to go to the capital market to borrow.
Doc, I want to pick you up on the employment issue since you've raised it. Where are we seeing, or where should we get the most jobs from? Employment that will be gainful, that will leave some lasting solution to the employees, if I can call them that.
Yeah.
Which areas of the economy should we be looking at? Agriculture, manufacturing, services. Which of them, and let me raise this point here.
Yeah.
Which of them do not have the capacity to really get the jobs numbers that we need?
Well, that's a very important question. I would say that to start from where you in terms of which sectors, and then I'll talk about which sectors don't have the capacity. One of the key sectors I would say is agriculture, but not agriculture in its current form. I grew up on I spent some time on my grandmother's farm, and I didn't want to be a farmer. I didn't want to be a farmer because farming was too rudimentary. It was manpower. So agriculture in its current form may not attract the youth, but it has the greatest potential for job creation. So what do we have to do? We've been talking about modernizing agriculture for a long time, but it's been too slow. So to push investments into agriculture such that they will be modern. It means that the use of more modern equipment to do agriculture, that makes agriculture more profitable, and that could attract youth into agriculture. When that happens, what it does is that it then creates the avenue for what we call linkages to manufacturing. So you can start manufacturing by processing agricultural products. So agro-industry is a key way through which we can boost our economy, not only in urban areas, but also in rural areas, because agriculture forms a big part of the economy of rural areas. So I would say agriculture linked to manufacturing and then to services. Because currently, I think services, about 46% of our GDP or more comes from services. Banking, telecommunication and so on. But their employment generation in that sector is not very strong. And therefore, yes, they are growing, but they are not absorbing the teeming young people that are coming out of our universities.
Will that also, because when I look at the oil and gas industry, will that be a similar picture there where it's fueling our economic growth, but the structure of it, I think the economists have a word, and you mentioned it before we came here, employment elasticity. It's not stretching enough to take in the people. So why don't we then have a compulsory push towards the agriculture, like you mentioned, for us to stimulate the jobs that we need?
I think that some efforts, to be fair, are being made. You know about the government flagship program called the Planting for Food and Jobs. And also when this oil revenue started coming in, is that the annual budgetary amounts, funding amounts?
The ABF.
Yes, part of it, you know, one of the sectors of focus was agriculture. And so, yes, I think there is effort from government to push the planting for food. And I think they recognize that jobs could come from agriculture and also agribusiness. But however, let me just raise one point, and it ties into business as usual that I talked about in agriculture. Government is supplying a lot of input in terms of fertilizers and seeds. But you see, if you supply fertilizers and seeds to farmers and it doesn't rain for one season, they are worse off than if they didn't get fertilizers and seeds. So it's good to supply fertilizers and seeds, but it's also important to look at irrigation, to look at machinery. That is how we can make our agriculture more modern and attract young people into agriculture.
This is the business edition of PM Express. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back. Right, welcome back from the break. My name is Philip Nanfuri. This is the business edition of PM Express, and my guest, Dr. Fred Janku. He's a research fellow at the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, ISA. Before we went on the break, we were talking about the ISA State of the Economy Report 2018, and he highlighted certain key issues they discussed: revenue, debt, and efficiency and expenditure. And more often than not, it seems these issues are recycled, but that's primarily the main nature of an economy. We can go up, we'll come back down, and it's like we go in a cycle or in a circle. But I hope that shouldn't bore you as we discuss these things and keep you informed. I want us to move on to the Ghana Beyond Aid part of our conversation, and we want to delve into the nitty-gritties of it and see if indeed, from his perspective, from an economic lens, whether we are putting the building blocks in place for a Ghana in the future, one beyond aid. Like I said at the beginning, from the document itself, it's not a rejection of aid or anti-aid. It's more about how we can grow our resources from within, use them creatively, as the word is in the document, efficiently and effectively, and also involves a change of our mindset, a can-do attitude rather than a can't-do attitude. So I'm going to cut straight to Doc. And first, to put it into perspective, Doc, aid and grants, is there a difference between these two?
Well, I mean, a grant is basically assistance that you receive either in terms of money or non-monetary, you know, assistance, which you don't have to pay back. So in many ways, they are similar,
Okay.
grants and aid.
Now, Ghana Beyond Aid, over the course of our development, we've had a number of plans that we've started in earnest and never saw the light of day or never saw completion. Off the top of my head, Vision 2020, President's Special Initiatives, Ghana Poverty and Growth Reduction Strategy, GPRS, Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda. Now we have Ghana Beyond Aid. I was reading an article from Nicholas Dehere of the IFS, published on my Joy Online, and he was making the argument that without this 40-year National Development Plan, which we started to discuss, resources went into, having a standalone Ghana Beyond Aid is good, fine, but if we don't tie it into something binding, we'll have a problem. The document itself acknowledges the fact that this should be a national discussion and not a government-specific discussion. What will you make of all these arguments?
Well, I would say I've heard this argument, and it's not the first time people have talked about having a national agenda, which the 40-year development plan is supposed to be. So I think it's good to have a national plan. I mean, not planning is it means you're planning to fail, some people say. So it's good to plan. But you see, that is not the problems we have. It's not necessarily because of a lack of a good plan. Look at the policies we have. I think the issue has to do with implementation of those plans. So I would say that it's a good starting point to tie these things. If we have a non-partisan debate and we agree that as a country, this is where we want to go, we want to have a Ghana Beyond Aid, why not? We can tie it into the whole development agenda, i.e. into the 40-year development plan. But it's not the panacea to our crisis, our problems or our challenges that we face in this country. I mean, you can have a good plan. What if the structure of the economy doesn't change and you don't have enough, capital to implement those plans? It's one thing to have a plan. It's another thing to implement those plans. And to implement those plans, you need, financing. One of the things you need. So yes, let's start with that. Let's have the agenda. Let's agree to put it in if we all agree as a country. But I doubt if that will be the solution. It's a good starting point, but it will not be a solution if our structure, the structure of our economy, remains the same.
I see the reason in your argument, but let me push it a bit further.
Yes.
Wouldn't it make sense for example, how corporations have their strategic plans for, let's say, 2019 to 2022, 2023, then we know that this is where we are heading as a country.
Yeah.
So on the agricultural front, this is what we want to see over the course of this, let's say, 40 years. We want to have this. It's, like you said, it's a good point, but shouldn't we rather be looking at that rather than continuing these different programs and interventions in isolation?
I agree. I mean, I agree with you that we should have, as a country, a vision of where we want to go. So that could be in the form of the 40-year development plan or whatever development plans that we have that are not necessarily tied with political parties so that they become coterminous with, if a party,
with their
terms. So it's a critical starting point, and we should push for it, and let's have it. But my point was that it's not enough. I mean, economists say it's a necessary condition probably, but it's not sufficient. Yeah.
Let me raise another point from this article I have referenced. And it reads, establishing a 17-member council to oversee implementation of the Ghana Beyond Aid, as provided for in the strategic document, seems an unnecessary duplication of roles. Why not have the appropriate state agency the NDPC, that's the National Development Planning Commission, I beg your pardon, championed the Ghana Beyond Aid along with the 40-year National Development Plan. Do you see, I don't know if you would align yourself with such an argument where we have a body mandated to chart such plans.
Yeah.
We've created a plan, and more or less, from the author's words, duplicated the role of the NDPC.
I think that this issue does not pertain only to this particular plan. I think it's a deeper problem that I think we have, that anytime we come up with an agenda, as good as it may be, we tend to want to create also new institutions to run them, which is not necessarily an efficient way of running things, particularly the fact that it's expensive to set up new institutions. You need offices, you need more personnel. I mean, it comes with a whole expenditure on its own. So I think NDPC championed this 40-year development plan. So why do we need a separate,
which the author argues we pumped in resources in there, and it's been left dead. Yeah. So it's more or less like we are shooting ourselves in the foot. Yeah. If you follow the,
I think it's a systemic problem. I mean, it's happened, in various other sectors. We want to do something. We think that we should create more development authorities. We should create more institutions, more ministries. That too. So I think that it will be more efficient, in my view, to when we come out with such plans, to use existing institutions. If those institutions are weak, the way to go about it is not to create new ones, it's to strengthen those institutions. But sometimes, because we feel the institutions are weak, they are not performing, then we tend to create new institutions. But I do not think that's the way to go.
We spoke about aids and grants.
Yeah.
So I took a copy of my 2019 budget, and I want to just extract a certain portion. I'm going to refer to 2018. The programmed revenue collection for Q1 to Q3 for grants alone was 504 million Ghana cedis. What we actually got for Q1 to Q3 was 525 million Ghana cedis, north of what we programmed or projected to collect. That's for grants alone. But if you look at the preponderance of revenues actually came from domestic revenue, about 48 billion Ghana cedis, and then non-tax revenue about 8 billion Ghana cedis, with other revenue making up about 2.1 billion Ghana cedis. We don't have, if you look at the quantum of funds, 1 million to 1 billion, the grant figure here is quite slow. It's quite low, I beg your pardon. So, to the layman's mind, we are doing well already with weaning ourselves off it in terms of using our revenues more than using the grants. Is that something that you would subscribe to? Well, after you answer, I'll read you something from the strategy document, from the Ghana Beyond Aid document, for us to juxtapose it.
Okay, I don't know if those figures include our capital expenditures. I think those are just are those revenues.
So that's just for.
That's okay. Okay, project grants and then
program grants.
Program grants, and then yeah. Well, so yes, I mean, if you look at even the figures from the media review, you would see that of our revenues and grants, a lot more is coming from domestic sources. But you see, the issue is that as we're discussing earlier on, a lot of our capital expenditures, which should be our concern, because that's what goes into fixing our roads, goes into fixing infrastructure, that is important for economic growth. A large chunk of that, I mean, I was checking the data the other time, about 1/5 of money for we look at gross capital formation, basically meaning your investments. are coming from aid or are coming from official development assistance. In fact, over the past 10 years, about 30% of gross capital formation as a proportion of GDP is from official development assistance or aid. So if we say we are winning ourselves off aid, what it means is that we have to, but it's not a huge, I mean, that's about 1.4 billion US dollars we are talking about, all right? And I think last year we got about 1.3 or so billion US dollars in official development assistance. That's a lot of money. So Ghana Beyond Aid basically means, of course, the document saes that it doesn't mean you are averse to.
We are rejecting.
We are rejecting aid.
We are anti-aid.
Yeah, but basically what it means is that you want to, have your destiny, as it were, in your own hands. To be able to, I mean, this is at independence. Remember, Nkrumah said Africa is capable of managing its own affairs. So, like you said, it's an old, I don't want to call it rhetoric, but it's something that we've been pursuing. So I would not say it's not possible, but I will say that with business as usual, it doesn't seem to me that we can achieve that. Because there is still a large gap in infrastructural development. Some people estimate about 30 billion US dollars infrastructure development gap. All right, so
that's huge.
That's huge. So even if we are not getting any, even if we are getting some development assistance, that's still not enough to fix our roads. It's not enough to fix our infrastructure. So going off it means that we have to do things differently.
And I think this is where the challenge comes in.
Yeah.
They're doing things differently. I also see in the same document, it talks about a change of mindset. And I would opine that it comes with also an appreciation of the issues in terms of we, the electorate, or we, the public. Let me just use, for example, the recent increases in the communication service tax. Government needs the revenue. At the same time, people don't want to be burdened with taxation.
Yeah.
So we have a point where a government needs something. The people don't want it. But it seems there's a communication gap also there on how it is. And I remember yesterday, I had a discussion with my colleague in the morning about how communication from fiscal authorities, monetary authorities, financial authorities can help reduce the burdens of some of these things and help with the cultural mindset or the cultural shift. I don't know what you make about it. In your work, do you feel like communication is key when it comes to some of these changes in policy, changes in economic dynamics, and the general understanding of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. But let me also say that there are various forms of communication, right? I'll give you an example. If you came back from every time your dad tells you that there is not enough money at home, and therefore you cannot afford an egg, But every time you come back from school and your dad is taking a bottle of beer at 6 p.m. before he goes to bed, he takes another bottle of beer, then you begin to question whether it's an issue of how the resources at the house are being allocated. Basically, I'm saying that yes, we should encourage as many people as possible to pay taxes, but also people are encouraged to pay taxes when they think that the taxes they are paying are being put to the appropriate use. So communication is key, but let's do the communication also by the way we live, by the way we appropriate public funds, by the way we use resources more efficiently. That in itself, when you ask people to pay more and they see that, or they believe, whether it's a perception or not, perceptions are important, that you are using resources more efficiently, it encourages them to pay.
So it boils back down to the transparency and accountability angle, where, because I think I was reading a blog from the IMF, and it mentioned the fact that if there's no transparency and accountability, the more governments come up with some of these changes, the more people tend to resist. And we can see ripple effects going on across even Africa to the Middle East area.
Sure.
There's also another key issue which I think we need to raise in this whole Ghana Beyond Aid discussion. And we've looked at the domestic resources, how we're going to ramp it up. You've mentioned infrastructure. Another key component, I believe we need to critically examine with regards to the private investment. We spoke about tax exemptions earlier on.
Yeah.
I was looking at data from the Bank of Ghana on our external creditors, and the majority of our external creditors are in the multilateral space, the AFDBs, the World Banks, etc. But we see the international capital markets also coming on strongly in there. At the same time, we want to grow foreign direct investment. How do we, I think the key question is the congenial environment. How do we put it in place to ensure that we have a balance between foreign direct investment, at the same time we market ourselves properly for international capital markets borrowings and other things? How do we put in place this congenial environment?
Well, so I think the issues are related. The congenial environment can be created in a number of ways. One of it, which sometimes we probably do not dwell on too much, is the issue of even infrastructure that I came to. Right. So the cost of doing business is an important indicator of whether or not somebody with capital would want to invest in your country. So it's not just the tax exemptions. It's also, you know, we spoke to a man a few years ago who is into investing into cashew for export, and he was talking about the fact that because the roads, you know, are not good, you need to buy your own trucks to ensure that the products get to the port in a state that it can be exported. So, but if you fix your infrastructure, and it's one major way of making your economy more conducive for investment. But of course, also then, because you would need at least to fix that kind of infrastructure, that then will have a ripple effect on the whole economy in terms of foreign direct investment. You need funds to do that. And that's when it becomes important to go to the capital markets or to have a mix of borrowing options. All right. So it depends on what you use those funds for. If you use the funds appropriately, it would generate the kind of economic activity that you expect, which would then lead you gradually to have a proper mix of where your funds are coming from in terms of both domestic and foreign. Because when the economy is booming, you then can get more money from within the economy. All right. So yes, you can bring in foreign capital, but invest it in the right places, which will then boost economic activity. That can lead you then to generate more domestic, you know, capital for your investments.
Okay. We're taking a quick break. This is the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri, and my guest, Dr. Fred Janku. He's a research fellow at ISER. We'll be right back. Right, welcome back from the break. This is the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri, and my guest, Dr. Fred Janku. He is a research fellow at ISER. And we'll be wrapping up shortly with our conversation, particularly on the Ghana Beyond Aid agenda. The document is quite broad, so exhausting it in this show will be an exercise in futility. But we'll do our best to try and sum it up and put it in context for you. Look, there's a part of the report that talks about building 5 broad goals: building a wealthy, inclusive, sustainable, empowered, and resilient society, and it's coined WISER. So I would assume it's wiser. So a wiser Ghana. Where you sit as an economist, largely, if I can call it that, are we in a position where we are building the blocks? Let's let's assume that Ghana Beyond Aid didn't have a document, and you were supposed to use the macro numbers to judge and tell us if indeed we're on a path to self-sufficiency and growing our own resources. Do you think we are putting that foundation in place?
That's an interesting question. I do not think that we are doing that because the so-called Georgesburg economy that we inherited, which the president has talked about, has not changed a lot in terms of structure. If you look at the structure of our economy, it's still largely gold, cocoa, and oil. And worst of all, we are not using even those resources that we have in terms of manufacturing, where the jobs can be created, right? So if we still have this kind of structure of an economy, it's difficult to say that we are on the path to where we want to be. Some efforts are being made. Of course, I talked about we talked about is it the 1D, 1F, right?
Yeah,
one district, one factory. All these are beautiful initiatives. I think they are good initiatives. It's good to be ambitious. So I think they are nice initiatives. But again, it comes to the bottleneck of implementation, how we are implementing them. So where I sit, I would not be able to say that we are doing some things right.
Yeah,
definitely. But I think that there's a lot more that we need to do. And I don't know if I talk a little bit about the inclusiveness that you talked about, which is important. The issue of inclusiveness is key, because you want to develop a country where you are not increasing your inequality is not increasing, where you are growing together. We used to talk about pro-poor growth, growth that is inclusive. It means also that we have to look at our rural folks. What are they doing? How can we make life better for those people? And one key area that we have to look at, apart from agriculture that I talked about, is also education. Okay, because education is critical, because it gives people opportunities to move further with their lives. And so we need to be able to put our resources. So I like the free SHS program. But the issue is, are we coming out with the kind of young people we need who can innovate, who can compete in the job market, right? So we need to begin to ask questions. You talked about sustainability, right? And we talked the other time during our lunch about sustainability of our debt. But not only sustainability of our debt, but sustainability of the paths that we have chosen in terms of development. How sustainable are these? At the beginning, you talked about these initiatives that we've had in the past. We've seen that they've not been sustainable. Why have they not been sustainable? Because when they started, they sounded like very good initiatives.
Ideas, yes.
Yeah. So we need to look at all these. So I would not say that we are there yet.
Yes.
I don't even know whether we are.
There's more room for improvement.
Definitely.
So the final one, just to put you on the spot, you have to pick one of the two answers. You can't give another way around it. Ghana Beyond Aid, regular rhetoric or actionable agenda. You have to pick one of the answers. And then make sure that the answer is in consonance with the points you've just given.
Well, it's an actionable agenda.
Okay.
It's an actionable agenda.
So it means that over time, we just need to hold and sustain over a course of time.
Yes.
And we're well and good.
Definitely.
Okay, this has been the business edition of PM Express. My guest, Dr. Fred Janku, a research fellow at the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research. My name, Philip Nanfuri. I thank you for your time. Have a good one.